You know that feeling when you check your bank account and it's technically fine, but you still feel completely behind? Like you're in your 30s, you have a job, maybe a car payment, maybe a 401k you barely look at, and some vague anxiety that you're supposed to have more by now. Meanwhile, every financial headline is telling you that millennials are suddenly rich. That the generation that got crushed by 2008, buried in student loans, and priced out of the housing market somehow quadrupled their collective net worth in the last few years. So, which is it? Are millennials doing great? Or does it just look that way on paper? That's exactly what this video is going to answer, with real numbers, broken down by age, so you can see exactly where you actually stand. My name is Seb, and I have an embarrassing habit of reading Federal Reserve reports for fun. If you're tired of hearing that your generation is either doomed or secretly thriving, hit that subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up if the numbers surprise you. Before we get to the numbers, let me ask you something. When someone says millennials now hold $18 trillion in total wealth, does that make you feel better about your finances? Probably not. And here's why that matters. The average is almost completely useless when the top 10% of millennials hold 69% of all millennial wealth. That's not a wealth statistic. That's a magic trick. Let's start with the number you actually care about, the median. The Federal Reserve's most recent survey of consumer finances gives us the clearest picture we have. And here's what it actually says. Broken down by age. If you're between 25 and 29, the median net worth in America is about $31,470. Not the average, the median, the middle of the road. Half of people your age have more, half have less. The average for that group, by contrast, is $120,183. Notice how different those two numbers are. That gap exists because a handful of extremely wealthy people at the top drag the average way up. When someone tells you the average millennial net worth, they are almost certainly showing you that inflated figure, not the median, which is what actually represents a typical person. Now, between 30 and 34, the median jumps to $88,631, and between 35 and 39, it's $138,588. By the time you hit 40 to 44, the oldest millennials, the median is $134,382. Here's what nobody talks about, the 25th percentile. Because if you're at the bottom quarter of your age group, these are the numbers that describe your life. For a 35 to 39-year-old, the 25th percentile net worth is just $16,548. Not a typo. That's the reality for a huge chunk of this generation that the headline numbers completely ignore. Think about it this way. Imagine you're in a room with 100 people your age. The median is just the person standing in the exact middle. But the average is calculated by including the one person in the room who sold a startup and has $4 million. That one person makes everyone's average look impressive, while you're standing there wondering why the math doesn't match your bank statement. This is what nobody talks about when they report on millennial wealth. Now, here's where it gets interesting, the generational comparison. You've probably heard that millennials are behind, that we own less, save less, and got a worse economic hand than our parents. And for a long time, that was true. But the 2022 data flipped the script in a way that actually surprised a lot of economists. In inflation-adjusted dollars, millennials at ages 35 to 44 had a median net worth of $135,300. Baby boomers at the same age had $100,840. Gen X, who hit their mid-30s right after the 2008 financial crisis, had just $59,890. Let me show you exactly how this works. A boomer who was 38 years old in 1995 had about $100,000 in today's dollars. A millennial who is 38 today has roughly $135,000. That is 34% more adjusted for inflation. The saint, Louis Fed, actually went a step further. and calculated that older millennials swung from 11% below their expected wealth trajectory in 2019 to 37% above it by 2022, a 48 percentage point swing in 3 years. So why doesn't it feel that way? Here's the uncomfortable reality. Because for millions of millennials, it isn't that way. The top 10% of millennial households have 140% more wealth than boomers did at the same age. But the bottom 10%, they actually have less. The average millennial outperforms prior generations. The typical millennial is running roughly even, and a significant chunk is still falling behind. The headline is technically true. It's just that the headline describes a very specific slice of your generation, not most of it. Here's where most people completely mess this up: retirement savings. Fidelity manages retirement accounts for tens of millions of Americans, and their most recent data puts the average millennial 401k balance at $67,300. The median, again the more honest number, is closer to $15,500 based on earlier published data. Now, here's the math that should keep you up at night. Fidelity's rule of thumb says you should have 1 times your salary saved by 30, 2 times by 35, and 3 times by 40. If you're earning $65,000 a year and you're 35, that means you should have $130,000 in retirement accounts. The actual median for millennials is around $65,000 across all ages, roughly half the benchmark. Here's the part that will blow your mind. A 35-year-old with $65,000 saved and 30 years until retirement, investing at a 7% average annual return, will end up with about $495,000 at age 65. That sounds like a lot, until you realize that most financial planners say you need somewhere between $1.2 and $1.5 million to retire comfortably, and millennials themselves say they believe they'll need $1.6 million. So if you're at the median today, you've got a gap to close. It's not impossible, but it is urgent. Here's the thing: your brain is actually working against you on this. There's a concept in behavioral economics called temporal discounting. It's a fancy way of saying your brain treats future money as fundamentally less real than money right now. A dollar today feels like a dollar. A dollar 30 years from now feels almost theoretical. So when you're deciding whether to increase your 401k contribution or spend that money on something today, your brain is not running a fair comparison. It's running a rigged one, and the future version of you always loses. The fix is boring, but it works. Automate the savings so the decision never gets made consciously. Your brain can't discount what it never sees. Let me be real with you for a second about the $18 trillion number. Millennials collectively hold around $18 trillion in wealth today, up from $3.9 trillion in 2019. That sounds extraordinary, and in some ways it is. Home prices surged 44% between 2019 and 2022. Stock markets went on an extended run. Business formation among under 30s doubled. These were real tailwinds, and they lifted a lot of boats. But here's the catch: most of that paper wealth is locked up. It's in a house you can't sell without needing another house. It's in a 401k you can't touch for 25 years. It's in unrealized stock gains. Economists have started calling this phantom wealth. It shows up on your net worth statement, but it doesn't show up in your actual life unless you convert it. And converting it usually has enormous costs attached. That's not an argument to feel bad. It's an argument to be precise about what your net worth actually means versus what it can actually do for you right now. So look, here's the bottom line. Millennials are, on average, doing better than any prior generation at the same age. That part is real. But the average is being pulled up by a wealthy minority, and the experience of the typical millennial is something much closer to cautiously okay than it is to thriving. Subscribe for more videos like this.